All right, so I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. My name is Patty Schramm. For those who don't know me, I'm the Parent Resource Coordinator Trainer for the SALT Talks, the online SALT Talks, that we're doing currently. I wanted to touch on this month about supports, tools, things that you can use to assist you with transition. Transition is a huge topic for many parents as well. You know, whether you're staff or parents, just this going from, whether you're going from high school to employment or high school to, post-secondary, or maybe going into independent living, or maybe somewhere down the road, maybe you're looking more at, with independent living, budgeting or buying someplace, or maybe retiring eventually. There's a lot that goes on transition throughout our children's lives and our lives. And so in the month of April, we visited things that could support us in trying to organize those goals for IEPs, ISPs, which are, of course, we use for individual planning, whether you're in school or outside of school or just in general. So we had seen at the beginning of the month, we had Sue Beck talk about backward planning, and then we met some parent mentors that were in the school system on how they could support us through the school. So now tonight we have Celia Schloemer. She's talking about charting the life course when planning for transition. So I'm going to turn it over to Celia and let her, talk about who she is and where she's from, and how this can apply and just work into our lives. How this works in and helps us get a good direction for goals and setting goals and achieving goals, and just kind of this whole planning part of transition. So I'll pass it on to you, Celia.
Thanks so much, Patty. I love working with Patty and with the SALT group. She was one of my first presentations when I joined the UCCEDD. Here, I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am. Let's see if I can get my slides to change. When I joined the UCCEDD at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, which is a University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disability, and I joined in late 2015, and I was introduced to Charting the LifeCourse in 2016. And Patty was one of the first people brave enough to let me come and talk about this. And I think I've missed 1 year. I think last year I didn't, but every other year she's been kind enough to invite me back and talk about this space that I'm so passionate about. And I love Charting the LifeCourse. I love it for kids in any transition, but transition to adult is a space where it's easy for people to see how it can be of assistance and how it's a great way to think. And it's a great set of tools. I do family support across the lifespan, so I can work with any family member, with individuals themselves, with parents, with grandparents, with siblings, all the way up into aging. So I have the real privilege of not having that cutoff at 18 or 22 or whatever it might be, depending on who we work for as an agency. But for families, what I love about that is I get to stay and continue to work with them, and I'll meet them when the kids are younger, and then they jump in and they come back and they talk to me more. So it really is a privilege to be in the spot that I'm in. And I love a tool that goes with me with those families. So that's super cool too. But I just want to make sure you have my contact information if you have any additional questions overall. So I want to tell you, Charting the LifeCourse is not ours. We didn't develop this. This was developed actually as a national conversation way back beginning in 2012. And it really was where a group of families and professionals came together and said, what does it really mean for families to feel supported? And this work came out of the University of Missouri, Kansas City. And the conversation that they had was captured in something called the Wing Spread Report. When we used to meet in person, I used to bring one with me because it's just a fascinating space for me as a family member, because I am a parent. I'm also a sibling. I'm a sister-in-law, and I'm an aunt to individuals with developmental disability. And so this really speaks volumes to me, because just within the family that I have, we have just a vast amount of ability and different approaches and different diagnoses. It's just there's a whole group of them, but this really embraces all of them. And I love that about it. So, but again, this is something that we embraced in Ohio in 2016, and we've been moving feverishly. We've now presented in have had a conversation with, I think it's 86 of the 88 counties, and each one is kind of embracing it however they want. This is not mandated within our state, though in some states it is. But what we like about it in Ohio and not mandating it is it belongs to families. And it really is a place for the family voice to come in. We love that professionals are interested. We love that professionals want to help get it to families. But what I love about this is, I always say it's not a form. It can be a worksheet, it can be a piece of paper, but forms tend to belong to systems. And so I hesitate to call any of these documents forms because they belong to families. And when families get handed a form, it usually gets handed back to one of us as a system, and we keep it. And this really is supposed to capture the family vision, the family voice, the family conversation. And we as professionals are just supporting them in having that and having access to tools that will help them have that. And the whole reason I love it in this space is because the bus is going to stop coming. And we know that in this age group, right? Parents talk about that expression. I can remember with my sister-in-law and several others where it's like, what am I going to do when the bus stops coming? And so that's a real phrase that families use all the time. But when we think about that, I always look at families and go, and have you anticipated what that's going to look like? Have you created that vision of what that might be? So have you thought about independent experiences outside of school and what those might look like before that end of school happens? Have you thought about or built skills or leaned into learning with your child or with you as a family of how it's going to look and how to get or keep a job? And I can tell you from personal experience as a mom, getting a job was not the issue. Keeping the job, and we hear that so much as professionals, that it's the keeping the job that's the issue. And it's a whole different set of skills to keep a job than to get a job. But as a parent, I know I was focused, and school focused with me on getting the job, having the skills and everything. But we'll talk a little bit about that tonight, that keeping the job is the issue. Learning what they like to do or they want to learn more about, and just having those conversations. What do you like? Because that boils down to keeping the job and keeping engaged in community. Because if we don't like it, we don't participate, right? And growing to be their own person, recognizing that their likes are not our likes, and what they want to do may be very different than what we imagine them doing, and being able to let go of that and let them have that experience, even if it's scary, because they might not be as successful as we want them to. There might be some difficulty in it, whatever it is that I think as families we get worried about. And we'll talk about that some more too. And then be able to be safe within home or in the community or alone with limited support, or if they need the support, where are we going to access it? And really starting to have those rich conversations with the folks that can help us think about that. And do we know what to do in case of an emergency? If something happens when we're not together, all those pieces, and walking through those. So there's so many layers to this idea of being an independent adult. And I will always say that I now say, I shouldn't say I always said, I no longer want my daughter to be independent. What I want for my daughter is that she's interdependent, because when she's interdependent, it means she has a village. And that's going to be much more important than independent, because when she strived and we strived for independence, it began to look like isolation. And so that interdependence is, to me, more what we're going for. So that was something that was super important to me. But the whole premise of Charting the Life Course is that all people and their families have the right to live, love, work, play, and pursue their life aspirations in their community. And really, some mindfulness was used by the group when they developed this as the core belief, because they made sure that it didn't say all people with disabilities, because we as families, our kids, we're no different than anybody else. We just want to live the life that we imagine living with the people that mean the most to us. doing the things that we love to do. And that's really what transition is about. I mean, we've got some boxes to tick as professionals, but really when you talk to a mom after her child has left high school, no matter what they do, if they go on to college, if they go into a job, if they go on to volunteer, if they join a community support group, if they join a systems support group, whatever they do, what we really want is we want to know they're happy and they're doing what they love and they're doing it with the people that they love and that care about them, and they're building that relationship reciprocity. And so that really is why we keep this phrase at the forefront of all the work we do. And really ultimately what we want is valued participation. We want social relationships where we're missed when we're gone. We want to be part of groups in our community that everybody's a part of, not just people with disabilities, but our neighbors, our friends. So we want to be valued in those spaces. We want to participate in things that are team-like, whether that's a sports team or whether that's a team where we all have the same belief, whether that's a church group, whatever that is, but that coming back. And a lot of kids with disabilities, even specific disabilities, don't congregate to that group effort, that community piece. But we do know, when I go back to that conversation about interdependence versus independence, we know that piece is important. We know intrinsically that as much as some of us avoid connection, that ultimately in those times that are most difficult or of crisis or whatever you want to call those, that being connected to others is imperative to us doing well in those situations. And that's known in social theory. We also know that we want to be, we can do this through volunteering. We can do this through employment. And that's something we really fought to be a view for every child coming out of high school, that we are seeking from the very first day that they're getting direct service within school through an IEP. We have that I in IDEA that tells us we have an eye on participating in the community and being employed. And that starts way back. That's not just when we get the transition IEP. That's into the first sections of IDEA that says that's what our goal is. So, and then lastly, those family and intimate relationships. They don't just want to hang out with mom and dad anymore. They want friends, they want girlfriends, they want a husband, they want a wife, they want all the things. And so really aiming this transition time to that valued participation is the way I kind of wrap it up in one big ball, because everybody's abilities and desires for what they see in that vision for life is different. So it's not, there are people that don't have a vision for employment, right? And there are people that don't necessarily want to hang out in groups, but we know that what makes a level of contentment and good mental health is to have valued participation. So that's always the focus. The other part that I'll share with you, for those of you that may have seen it before or not, this is the way we look at that valued participation. So if you look at this model, this really sums up what we're trying to do in this movement of Charting the LifeCourse. And that is that we are, if you look to the one on the left, every person is viewed not only as the person, but the person within the context of their family and within their community. We all live in that model, right? Whether that's birth family, whether that's chosen family, whatever that looks like for you. We don't define it as a blood relationship or a guardian or anything like that. It's just it's your village. So your life is kind of constructed on those three circles of being a person within the context of a family and a supportive village in the context of community, right? And so if that's where we all begin, if you look to that model in the center, when we developed any kind of supports or services in the community, whether it's mental health services, whether it's DD services, whether it's medical services, what we did is we had those services wrapped around and focus on that person, right? But when we began to develop those years ago, we didn't recognize that those services often became a barrier to that person in the context of their family, even much less in the context of their community. And I share with you, I told you I was a sibling. Well, I was a sibling. My sister was born with a pretty significant developmental disability, and she was the oldest in her family and our family, and I was the youngest. And she was one of the last kids that was placed in an institution when she was very young. She was under 3 years old. And so right there. Now we're not doing that anymore, right? We can say that's not how we're delivering services anymore, but it was the family voice that said, this is not okay. This is not what we want. And it turned into something different. But we can recognize even now, when I think of things and I talk to families about like one-to-one support in school, right? Really important service. And many families had very long and difficult conversations to get that level of support, right? But if we don't have an eye for how that is integrated in a way that it doesn't separate the child from their school family or their school community, and we don't watch for that, it can do that. I always use the example of when a child's in first or second grade and they've got one-to-one support, and that one-to-one support has lunch with them in the cafeteria, everybody wants to sit at the table because Miss Jones is at the table too, and it's really cool to sit with her, right? And so that table's full. But by the time you get 13 or 14 years old, that's not the case anymore. In fact, intentionally for teens, that table's empty because we don't want to sit with an adult anymore at that age. So recognizing that we have to look at how those services are delivered. So that symbol on the right, where those stars are floating around, we're going to talk about the star in depth today. But when we look at that, it's what we want those services to be integrated in a way that we still have that person within the context of family and community being considered all the time as we develop it. So I want to take a second, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see your faces in this in a second, but I want to have a conversation just in the chat about what's the bravest thing you've ever imagined for your child. When we talk about having a vision for your child, for the children that you support, and for those of you that are professionals, it can be your child, whether your child has a developmental disability or not, because these tools were developed for any family. It was created in the disability world, but it was not developed just for kids with disability. So what I want you to do, and this whole presentation is really built around these conversations. So I'm really hoping everyone will participate. But will you please take a minute to put something in the chat that was like the bravest thing that you're like, oh, if they could just do that, or oh, and I'd like if people are willing to share that in the chat, we can talk about that a little bit. Everybody there?
Can you repeat what you want again, just so I make sure we all understand?
Yeah, so I just want them to share ideas that when they started envisioning things for their child or for a child that they support, what's the bravest thing they were willing to let themselves think about? And it could be much surpassed by now, but I just want to kind of shake the cobwebs off as we start to talk about having a vision for your child outside of transition, to say, when was that first time that you really had a vision? I can share for you that mine was when I was pregnant with my daughter. And I began to think about when she got married, when she did this, when she did that, those first steps, all those things, driving to work or around the community. Thank you, Patty. I want my child to enjoy being out of school and living in the adult world. Cool. Very cool. Anybody else be willing to share? That's exactly what I'm talking about. You know, we get so lost in the to-dos and the checking of the boxes that we forget our power as families to dream about what's possible. And I get to talk about that, dreaming about what's possible all the time. And Patty, I want to ask you something, if it's okay if I put you on the spot. When you thought about him driving to work and around the community, maybe to go to movies with friends or whatever it is, was that something that you would have happened had you not kept that in the forefront of your mind? Do you feel like that's something that the dream is keeping it in the realm of possibility? Does that make sense?
Yeah, we kept, it was something we hadn't really planned on or thought he could do. But it was like, as he started to progress through high school and then transitioning into the project life, project search, and into employment, just this kind of came out that he wanted to try it. And it was like, so we put it into it. We didn't think it was possible. We put it into then our set of goals to work on. And many groups assisted to help with the evaluations and the training and everything.
It takes a lot of work, doesn't it? But if
Yeah.
you don't imagine it, you don't even imagine doing the work, right? So that's the beauty of all of this. I'm looking at some of the others. I want my child to I want them to feel accepted in the community, and I want them to make a friend at school. And, you know, those are simple things. And often when we're working on math and English, and whether or not they're reading at a 3rd grade level, or whether or not they have this skill or that skill, we lose sight of that simple thing of making a friend at school, and that intentional. And I'll tell you, from a personal standpoint, making friends, I didn't realize what an issue it was going to become for my adult daughter when she didn't have that place of common interest to go back to, where we had shared common experiences and we could at the very least talk about those, right? And so, yeah, making a friend, or knowing how to make a friend, you know, knowing how to create a common space of interest, or recognize what my own interests even are. And I see Sandra is talking about that independent living in a neighborhood community with supports, and imagining mobility and all those things. And I share a story with you of a family. When I first started this work, we did what we called a Charting the LifeCourse kind of support group, I guess. We didn't really have a name for it, but we all came together to talk about with and about these tools. And when we did that, there were 2 moms that were coming in from Forest Hills, and both of their kids had used different means for mobility than typically. And so when they began to kind of connect in that space, they we were talking more and more about that vision and what it would look like. And on the way home one night, they were passing a construction site for a builder who had done several apartment kind of complexes around their area. And they literally stopped and talked to somebody there and said, have you ever considered building one of these communities that you keep building it where we live, and make that possibility for those who are differently mobile to be able to be integrated in and have some places that are set up for them. And they came back and they're like, we don't know if that's going to happen or not happen. But the fact that they had changed their thinking in a way to have that conversation with somebody who was building in their area and saying, we would love it if you would consider doing that for our child. But my point in this chat talk is to say, without having that vision of possibility, without looking and visioning in general about what it might look like, and now with the age that your kids are, capturing their feelings or giving them experiences to know what they could even possibly think about, is really important, because it can have a huge impact. So I love that, you know, each one of you have had things that it has moved the needle a little bit for your child. And that's really what I was hoping for in this conversation. So I want to go back to sharing my screen. Hold on one second, if I can remember how to do that. Sorry. I knew I was going to get into trouble with that. There we go. Sorry. Let's change from the current slide. All right. So we talked today that we said today we would also talk about, oh, am I sharing? Yes. That we would also talk about building friendships and relationships, that community, because the important part of that is you think about when you are looking for employment, or you're looking for those, if we broaden it and say those places where I'm valued, right? When we're looking for that, we often make those connections through people that we know. And if we aren't making those friendships or those outside relationships that lead to community, then again, what I talked about earlier, that interdependence versus independence, because independence can look like isolation. We really want to be thinking about how we build community, because we know that community is built through connecting, right? And we know that this takes time, and we know that it's built on common interests, common values, common preferences. And so we've got to understand what we like and what we don't like. And a lot of my experience with my daughter and with my niece was that they got very good at making adults happy in school. I like what you want me to like. I'm good at what you want me to be good at. I focus in the areas that at the end, you look satisfied and I don't disappoint you. But they really didn't know what they liked or didn't like. And that didn't come till later. And so thinking about how to have those experiences of what I like and don't like, and then meeting other people that like the things that I like. I think about in COVID when we would have conversation, it was like we were talking about what we were, what's that called? Streaming, or binge watching, the stuff we were binge watching. What was that? And we were connecting with people, whether you were watching this one or that one, and things like that. So common interests, again, build that sense of community, right? And so that's important to the work. But the other thing is, we can't have relationship unless we have reciprocity. And we forget that as parents. And I encourage all the parents in the room to think about this with all their kids. But I think in COVID, all of us coming out of isolation, it's important for us to recognize that connection between people is the deeper connections are built on this need for each other, right? And you can't just have one person who's needy. You need, both people need to be needed, right? And so you need to be able to rely on each other and have this reciprocity. I need to know the gifts I bring into the room and what you look to me for in terms of relationship. And we forget this with our kids with disabilities. And I think of this as the birthday party, that I always know that parents, we can relate to that invitation to the birthday party and whether or not it was going to come. Were they going to get the invitation? And now as we're older, they get to be the one having the party, right? We can think of ways to create opportunities for them to have reciprocal relationship. And one of the simplest things I did, and I've shared it over and over again at Salt Talks, was when I encouraged a young lady who was really good with dates. She knew everyone's birthday, right? It was just something she knew. So you knew if you ran into her in the community and it happened to be the month that your birthday was coming up, she would look at you and go, your birthday's in 2 weeks, or whatever it was. It was just kind of her hot button. So we found something she was really good at. And then we worked on sending snail mail birthday cards to her typical peers who had gone away to school, because they covet that mail. Did all of them write her back? No. But she tells stories about when she went into the grocery store at Christmas break and ran into one of them, and they came up and was like, oh, I got the birthday card. Thank you so much, whatever it was. But that encounter of reciprocity, that I have value in that I did something that someone appreciated. So little things that we can do to build that kind of connection in people can be really valuable. And why am I talking about all this in a conversation that maybe you came into thinking was about employment or that transition to adulthood in that lens, or even what you had brought up in terms of financial or supported decision making? I need those connections with people to better understand myself and better understand what I'm capable of or where I am valued. And those things lend into employment conversations and my ability to feel capable at a job, or my ability to know I'm capable of, with support, making a decision. So as much as I may not need a relationship that involves talking every day or sitting across from each other and having a beer, whatever it is, that idea that I know I have people that are in my court and that I support and that need support from me really is a game changer in any one of these conversations. So when you identify interests and talents, that can also be a place to grow connection, right? And when I know people, I can contact them and say, hey, where do you work? Are they hiring? Or when I fill out an application and it says, who referred you or who told you about this position, I can list your name. I can have a connection. So it's any of those things in between. But we really need to take the time to grow interests and find talents, right? And that comes through experiences. And you guys know, that are professionals and families, know better than anyone right now that the level of experience that your kids have coming out of high school or coming out of transition into adulthood is less, right? We know that in COVID, they had fewer experiences. So this part is even more important in terms of what we think about or talk about developing or growing in this space of transition. But taking that initiative to find and try new things, which is not always easy, and it takes a lot of time, especially for kids coming out of this pandemic. And then really looking at the impact to look at whether it was a good experience or it was a bad experience, and what do we want to try, or what can we glean from this most recent experience. and then really begin to develop what that vision might look like. And a vision doesn't have to be out when I'm 25. A vision can be for a year. I worked with a mom who had a fourth grade boy who she was supporting and using these tools. And in that conversation, she began to think about what he would look like at 12th grade. She began to imagine, back to that first chat we had, what was the bravest thing you ever imagined? And she's like, I want him to go to college. And I'm like, okay. So thinking about wanting him to go to college, let's use that backward planning that you guys learned about, right? If that's in the lens of what we want at 12th grade or after, what do we need to be thinking about right now? And it impacts every decision. When we start to talk about alternate assessment, when we start to talk about stepping a little bit away from the core standards, any of those conversations, she knew a different conversation then when she began to have that. So just knowing that lens and having a lens of possibility. Is he guaranteed to go to college? No more so than maybe Patty's son was guaranteed to get his driver's license. But we know that they're guaranteed not to if we don't have it in our lens. So that's really why I wanted to do that chat of shaking up that view of what's possible and what is it that I imagined. And how to, my brother, when my niece was born with Down syndrome, my brother came out of the delivery room and said, I guess I'm not paying for the wedding. And we all know that that's not the case anymore. Social media tells us every day with all the stories, but we do know that that's a possibility. But we can get into those places that when we succumb to not having a vision, that we think things are impossible. So my beginning part of my conversation here is really to shake the cobwebs off from professionals and teachers too, to start looking at what's possible, because when we can put it back in our lens, we have a better chance of making something happen. And so that life experience piece, and we know that life experiences equal outcomes. The more experiences I have, the more likely I am to be able to move through those experiences, learn from them, and have good outcomes. So the more experiences I have connecting with peers and learning what I like and what they like and what it feels like to have a reciprocated relationship or feels like to give in a room, the more likely I am to have friends, right? And we can break that down into chunks, but that's going to be an individual space of each child's going to look different. And so we'll talk about how you can use those tools to do that. Just hang with me a second. I want to have another conversation in a bit. So when we develop skills like this, they can lead to being more included, that about anything that you do. For me, the most recent experience I had was I decided to learn to ride, not learn to ride a bike again, because you don't forget, but to ride a bike again. And I can tell you, my confidence was shot very quickly. All of a sudden, I realized how unsure I was about that skill. And so again, that idea of confidence can be a game changer. And when spaces or actions are familiar, we feel more confident, right? So again, back to those experiences. So when we think about identifying interests and talents, we really want, when I say I want to be valued, we're really saying I want to be seen. I want to be noticed, and I want to be included, right? And so when we look at how we might do that, we can begin to think about some of these tools. One of the tools that we use is called a one-page person-centered description. And in that tool, the first question it asks is, what do people like and admire about you? And that's really hard for anyone to say. And I always encourage families to have their kids and the family members themselves go around and ask people, if you were asked what you like and admire about me, what would you say? And take a real deep look at those. If nothing else, it's great job interview material. I understand they think I'm really energetic. I think they think I'm charming, whatever it is. But but that idea of what do people like and admire about you, and what a game changer that can be in confidence. So now we've got this idea that we've got this vision, we're going to do that backward planning of, if this is where we want to end up, what's it take to get there? Then we're kind of moving from this strength-based lens of really saying, what does it take? What do I bring to the table where I can be valued in a job, volunteering, in a relationship? Because when you ask kids what they want or see in their lives, the first thing they may say is a job, but likely there's a lot of other things. A girlfriend, I want to get married, I want to have kids, right? And when we think of ourselves in those places, we have to understand what gifts we bring to the room. So again, working around those things. We all know the standard employment conversation about hard skills and soft skills and social skills, right? We know those are all important. Hard skills are things that are taught. You can learn them. There's a certain job or a task. If I want to be an electrician, if I want to be working in construction, if I want to work at a restaurant, we know there are hard skills, and we know as educators and as professionals, we know where we can get training for those skills, right? But then there's those soft skills. They're people skills. They're kind of like your attitude, right? Or the social skills of being flexible or having appropriate relationship. And when I started earlier and I talked about, likely it is not lack of hard skills that are going to have us, first of all, that when we get a job, it's not getting the job that's difficult, it's keeping the job, because we can practice interviews, we can practice knowing what to wear, we can practice a hard skill like running a computer or running a cash register or greeting someone when they come in the door or whatever it is. We can practice those things, but those soft skills and those social skills are something we can't necessarily plan for. And what we know from Aaron Riley and folks that talk around project search and things like that, what we know is those are the things that likely cause someone to lose a job, right? Or not keep a job. We don't respond appropriately to a situation that catches us off guard. We don't have a script in our head of what to say when something isn't what we expected. And so we don't appear as flexible, right? We might not have the people skills. We might not show or be able to put that smile on and not show that we're grumpy that day, or we have a bad attitude, or we just don't feel like working. And those are the things that kind of hit us from behind and get in the way of employment or even volunteering or even friendships or relationships, right? And so we can practice some of those, but some of those we have to work on and build through positive experiences that make me feel capable and help me understand the true response, right? When I lose a friend because I've said something inappropriate, when I lose a friend because I've gotten really angry and stomped off one too many times, I learned very quickly that doesn't work. That doesn't mean I have the skills to stop myself from doing that. That may come with maturity and age. And so there is that gap too. So soft skills can reveal who you are. And when you start to begin to understand who you are, you have a better chance of making good connection. Soft skills and social skills can support you and help you express what your values are and how they fit with everyone else's values. They can help you get along and work well and play well with others, right? They can help you do and keep your job. And they're used every day at work, but they're very hard to teach other than through experiences and having good and bad experiences by knowing them or not knowing them, if that makes sense. So I work a lot with families with these tools to start identifying some things that they might want to work on. These are great things to add to a transition IEP. These are great things to use in a social skills class. This is great to do with peers and family when you're together outside of school, to start saying, there's games even where you can say, this is the situation, how would you respond, kinds of things. So I'm going to do this again, but this time I'm going to ask you guys to open up your mics. If you're too shy, you can type in the chat. Patty had shared with me that's not something you guys are used to, but I usually call this section my open mic section. But I want you to imagine, some of you answered this in the earlier question, But when you just think of what am I going to do all day, right? What is it that I'm going to do all day? We're going to start with just that question. I'm going to stop sharing, whoops, my screen again. And I'm going to go back to that slide so I can see it, and I'll ask the questions as we go. But I want you to think a little bit about what it is that you imagine your child's, or the kids that when you start to imagine what it looks like for them in adulthood in those first couple of years. What do you imagine? What would it look like? And so you can put it in the chat, or you can unmute. My favorite would be unmute, because then I don't feel so lonely, but I'm not going to force anybody to do anything too terribly uncomfortable. But just imagine, what does a day in their life look like? Go ahead, Sandra. I see you unmuted.
Yeah. A day in the life would be multiple trips somewhere within the community, minimally daily, whether it's the library or the park or a therapy, mixing up the activities so that some were fun and some were a little harder, and some kind of music on a regular basis, even if it's daily. And what she would want, but I don't, is a little bit of screen time every day.
Did you say screaming or screen?
Screen time, like TV.
Screen time. Okay. And so first of all, what I love that you said, Sandra, is that it's what she wants and what I don't want. And what I say is people's visions collide. Their trajectories, which is the tool we use in Charting the LifeCourse to capture the vision, they collide. And we are, whose vision, whose trajectory is a priority at any given time can change, right? So absolutely, ours don't always align. But when you imagine her as an adult, that's going to be there. For any of our kids, that's going to be there, right? And so, but I love that you've captured all of it. I have a little bit of a look into who she is. I'm not sure which is driven by, so that need of going places and having something to do could be both your needs for that matter. But then, so what strengths or skills is it going to take to do those things is the next thing to think about. But does anybody else have a vision for what the day might look like? I always tell the kids when I'm doing this with the kids, I say, tell me about your very best day. What would your best day look like? Is anybody willing to share?
I know when I've been in part of some groups and different things, and I can see it with the one parent told me once that their child's perfect day was staying in their pajamas all day and watching a video or playing games on the TV, and then and then going to bed that night. They said that would be their child's perfect world, is what they were saying. But to get away from that, it's like, yeah, our son likes to get out in the community. So whether he's working part-time or full-time, he likes to be around people, whatever it is, volunteering to camp, or whether just going to a library, and that would be our hope, would just be for him to be out working part-time, full-time, and being involved in the community. I see there's one in the chat box too, which I agree with too, with Deanna.
Yeah, working part-time, volunteering, some training, life skills, time with friends, and some fun activities on some days. So it doesn't sound much off than what I want. I would love to work part-time, first of all. But you think about those things, and then you think about, okay, so what strengths do you need to be somebody that has each of these things? So screen time, I think about screen time. What strengths do you need for that? You need to be able to know when to jump off, right? You need to know when to stop and not do that anymore. And that is a skill and a strength. And we don't learn that skill or strength unless we have the opportunity to learn from our mistakes, and maybe have supervised screen time, not unsupervised, that's not what I mean, but those times to try and say, I know I have to do this and I know I have to do this, and kind of playing around with what happens when, right? And screen time at work. So I know that that's been something that we've talked about with Project Search and other places, is that need for the screen at work and things like that, and being able to step it away and keep the phone in the pocket or hand the phone over or whatever it is. So yeah, and thinking about what the skills or the strengths are, because we know to work part-time, we might know that they need to have certain skills, but one thing that I can share from my daughter's perspective was, well, two things. One was the idea that she learned that the role that she had chosen of what she thought she wanted to do did not work for her, because it meant she was sitting at a computer kind of doing repetitive tasks, which we thought would be great for her, but she did not like it at all. It needed to change. It needed to be inside and outside. It needed to be at a desk and in another room. And so those kinds of opportunities of that looked different. She wanted it to look different every day. And when she got into a job, what it meant when she didn't get jobs like that is that her employment was very short. And it wasn't because she got let go. It was because she would want to quit because she got bored with it, right? And so that need for change. And then on her days off, I was thinking of what Sandra had said, or your pajama day. Her 2 days off are not weekends. So they're Mondays and Tuesdays. And she really has to consciously plan some things that get her out of the house, because if she starts with her pajama day, then she's never leaving the house and she's never going to get any of her things done. So she saves a couple of errands to get her out of the house so that she's doing more, and then comes back for her downtime, because she's not one that likes to go out and be out and about, if that makes sense. So really looking at those and then really saying, okay, so if this is what I imagine, I mean, I just think of you, Sandra, and the idea of, you know, is it in her trajectory to drive, or are you already imagining that you're going to be driving her and taking her all those places, and you've already kind of created yourself as a resource? And that's not a question you have to answer, but in general, you know, you start to think about that. So what are the opportunities and what are the supports I have, and what are the skills? Because you're likely going to have to grow both if that's every day, all day, and you have a trajectory of your own of what you would like to do. So thinking about those things. And I know as parents, sometimes we giggle when someone says, yeah, mom has a trajectory. No, mom doesn't get a trajectory. But I'm saying we do have to, for our own mental health, kind of oversee and supervise that part of it, and make sure that we are meeting our needs in that way, and imagining maybe there's another way to do it. Now, I will say, Sandra, transportation is the trickiest one and having that. But yeah, so, but I really wanted you guys to think about, how are you growing those skills in order to be moving along towards that vision of what you want, and having that perfect day, because ultimately we want our kids to be happy. All right, I'm going to jump back here and share my screen again. Let's see. We'll have to figure out where it goes. Hold on. All right, can you see my screen again? If somebody will type yes in the box, I'd appreciate it. So, so that idea of a connected community is really what we're working on, and having that vision, because all of that leads to that full life and those opportunities where I can be valued. I always, whenever I have a conversation about a connected community that leads to a space where I'm valued, I think of the young man who actually was originally a Project Search employee at Cincinnati Children's, where I work. And he works in our division for developmental and behavioral pediatrics, where my office was. I haven't been back to work in the whole 2 years of the pandemic yet at the office. But in that space, Raphael had a job, and he was there several days a week. I have to believe he was there at least 20 hours a week. But anyway, he was no longer a Project Search employee. He was hired to work at Children's. And whenever Raphael finished his lunch, he would sit outside the elevators till his lunch time was over, his lunch hour, his lunch 30 minutes, whatever you call it. And he would sit outside the chairs at the elevators, and he would wait for people to be going on to the elevators to go get their own lunch. And he would greet them. No one gave him this job. No one told him what to do. He would just sit there And every day, as soon as he was finished with his lunch, he left the break room and he went and sat in those chairs. And every day, if you went down to lunch when Raphael was sitting there, he would stop you and go, hello, how are you today? You look beautiful. I love your hair. I love your shirt. And I love your purple shoes, or whatever he would say. But it was very complimentary. It made everyone feel noticed and seen and valued. And he created this on his own. And we very quickly would do the same and ask the same of him. How are you? I really like the shirt you have on today too. Have a great day, was the end for both of us whenever we would leave. But he created a space where he was valued and seen just as Raphael, not as his job, not as what he accomplished, but just as him. And he sought it out and created it on his own. And it just fascinated me. But I can tell you, every time I went by there and he wasn't there, I was disappointed. I was wondering where he was and if he was okay. I typically found somebody that worked with him regularly and said, is he okay? Is everything all right? That's all we want for our kids, right? So it was a beautiful story about how that connected community really led to a place of value for him. It wasn't about the job itself. So and that can go either way. So anyway, the other thing that we know about this idea of charting the life course, seeing life in a vision, looking for the support to accomplish the vision, is that visions are not built out of what systems have. And this for me is the hardest nut to crack in terms of how we as professionals do our work, and how I always tell families, we've trained them to look for the next good or service. We've said, don't worry about that in early intervention. When you get to school, they'll take care of that. And they keep kind of doing that as we move through, right? That will come when you get the transition IEP. They'll do that in high school. We teach them to wait and they'll be given the next thing. And what that did for me is I stopped thinking for myself of what might work or might be, and began to just wait and see what fit and see if it fit at all. And if it didn't fit, then I was on plan B, but I wasn't sure I had a plan B.
Celia,
so
there's a black box on your screen. I'm not sure.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
Thank
detect
you.
that. Yes.
There we go. There
Thank
we go.
you.
I moved the chat box. I'm so sorry. So what ends up happening is that we start to begin to look and vision to fit what we've told. So instead of saying, for example, I'm really hoping they get to work in a hospital setting because they really like this and they really like this and they're really good at this, or I really want them to have friends and get to go bowling, or maybe not even bowling. Maybe they want to do archery, or maybe they want to do slot car racing, or something that isn't typically a go-to in the disability community. But, or we're naming a program. Oh, they're going to go on and do Project Search, which is a working employment and growing into. That's not a bad thing. I just want to kind of shake our heads to go, it's not always about what we have to offer. It's really about what they want, and changing as families those conversations that you have with your kids, and then finding that right fit, right? But for my own daughter, and I will share with you that she didn't qualify for the level of sport I would have liked her to have when she was leaving high school. But as we went into employment after she left school, our biggest thing was she didn't know how to be an employee. That simple stuff like getting there on time and coming in the next day when the last day was hard and things like that. And I ended up looking to a friend to say, we need help, and we just needed to learn to be an employee and just that basic skill. And we did that. And systems have that, but they didn't have it for her at that time. But I guess my point is not to get so caught in the vision of what's being offered or what could be, and really back it up and get to your vision and your child's vision. Because what we end up looking for is, we talk a lot about, we want them to have support, right? Wherever they are. But what they really often want is choice and control, right? And we want them to participate, and we worry about whether they participate. That goes all the way back to that birthday party conversation. But what they really want is that idea of contributing and knowing that somebody comes up and goes, wow, that's super cool that you did that, or that was really helpful, thank you, whatever it is. We talk about that independence versus interdependence. We talked about that. what systems often have is a plan, and what we really want is that great life, that life that they desire. You know, we talk about having that social group, but what we really want is that connected community of where all this kind of jives together. And we watch all our kids make those things happen. And it doesn't happen magically when the diploma gets handed to them, whether they're a high school diploma or whether it's our typical kids and it's a college diploma. It takes work, and it takes good experiences, and it takes bad experiences. So I want to encourage all of you to have that vision beyond what systems have to offer to what really is driven by what the vision is that the family has and or that the child has, right? Because that vision can give you something to lean into. It can help you have a direction, and it helps you share with others where you want to go and why, and they'll remember, and they'll come back and go, hey, I heard about this thing. And has John or Sue ever thought about working here? Or I have a friend who works here. But the more you share the vision of what they're trying to make happen, the more likely it is that you'll run into folks that will come back with opportunity. The other beautiful thing about a vision is it can inspire others to get involved and help you, because we as families need that support. And that's where we're going to get with the most of our time, is to utilize these tools in this last half hour. But a vision encourages you to use those, encourages you and those around you to think about the possibility. And it can include the person with a disability, can include their family and the professionals, all to have that lens of possibility. And from the beginning, I've talked about that vision, and the vision tool that we have is the trajectory. And it asks two basic questions: what do you want and what you don't want? And really just keeping that at the forefront. If you do nothing else when you walk away from this, other than look at that, your child that you love and support, or look at that child that you support professionally and go, what is it that you want when graduation is over? And what is it that you're trying to avoid? What are you afraid of? What do you not want to happen? What cannot happen for you to have a good day? And really kind of going deep with just those two simple questions, and see how it changes how you support them or how you have a conversation with them. And if parents, if what you want doesn't align with what your child wants, if you both do a box of what I want, what I don't want, look for common ground and start there in this conversation, because sometimes these are hard conversations, right? So when we do this, and this is the tool I wanted to get to, because Patty and I really thought it was going to be a great tool to work together on, which is the Charting the LifeCourse Integrated Support Star. And that was that vision that you had, or that symbol that you had floating around on that visionary, model tool, where we had the person at the center of their family, at the center of community. And in the Charting the LifeCourse Star, we talk about 5 different areas that we can use to get support. And I think this is game changer for families when you're in lots of different ways, whether you're mapping what you have currently and what you've accessed, which we'll do a little bit of, whether you're trying to problem solve around something that there's a gap in, or that you're, in a particularly challenging situation. If you're trying to think about how to help someone as a professional and bring a lot of people's ideas together, which we'll use this tool for, it's another great tool. But basically what we're saying is we want to think about their personal strengths. You want to think about what skills they have, or what do they need to learn and practice. We touched on this in some of our conversations. What of these will help me make safe decisions, prevent abuse? There's this space of fear often with a lot of these folks. And this is a star that I developed around that idea that Patty mentioned around supported decision making, right? And knowing whether I'm going to be a decision maker when I move into adulthood. So I chose this one to kind of help you understand the star, so that you could think about it from that realm. What we need to do is question whether we're growing a decision maker, right? Whether we do guardianship or supported decision making. First of all, Ohio supports any or all of those choices, but we know that even if we chose guardianship, we can still do supported decision making. And we want to know that that child's learning the skills and has the confidence to say what they want or express a decision, so that we can hear it and consider it in the conversation, right? So this star we developed around with a group around supported decision making, and in their fear of not making this or not hesitating to allow supported decision making versus guardianships was that whole fear of being taken advantage of or abused. So relationships, do I understand how to safely evaluate a relationship? Am I finding ways to connect and grow safe relationships? Do I know who's safe, right? And then where do I go in the community, and who do I spend time with there? And am I learning how to be safe in those settings and learning about how to and who's okay to participate in community with, and are we growing that skill? And then am I finding ways to use technology in my relationships to stay connected? And COVID was one that we had a lot of conversation about. We've all gotten to be a little bit more technologically connected and not as much physically connected, but do we know how to stay safe in that space in our community? And then eligibility, how can I use the supports from other parts of the STAR to maximize what I receive in order to make and be a person that's able to make safe decisions? And that's the important thing with the STAR, is to really go to eligibility last by thinking about those other 4 spaces, because whenever we make a decision, we're utilizing all 5 points of the STAR. We might look to our personal strengths first when we're trying to decide even what's for dinner. I don't feel like cooking. Relationships, I wonder if my husband could pick something up on the way home. Technology, or I could just use an app and order it and he could just grab it, right? Or we could all go down to that restaurant that has an outdoor seating area and just enjoy each other. Or I can use my, my gift card, my points, whatever it might be, that allows me to be eligible for something or some sort of meal. So we do this in decision making all the time. And it's just a natural place to start a conversation with our transition age youth. So these are 2 stars that you will receive a copy of, or may have already, depending on if Patty brought them in. But we are 2 that I just share with you. One's around developing a connected community, and one's about just daily life of ways I might utilize supports, right? But what I want to do is work on a star together and fill in a star together. And the one thing about the star is you always want to know your why, and that goes in the center of the star. So you don't want to do a star for no reason. I don't recommend that. But what you're typically looking for is to map the support that you might have access to make something happen that you want to happen, or to solve a problem. Or maybe you just put your child's name in the middle. And your why is because I just want to think about them in these 4 different ways, or 5 different ways, if you have access to eligibility supports, and just see what we might access, right? So that's an important part. So what I want to do is take a minute. We're going to go back to having a conversation again about what supports you've learned about in SALT, in these different things that Patty has done in the realm of that that support star. So I'm going to pull up a star, and what I'd like to do is fill it out together, if you're willing to do that with me, and everybody will humor me in that. Except for it's not showing up. Hold on one second. Bring this down for a second. Let's see. I opened it purposely so I would have it. So give me 1 second. And then I'm going to show you the website real quick. Here we are. Okay. Here we go. So I'm hoping people will unmute or type in the chat as we work on a star around supporting a young adult in transition. And I want to do eligibility last. That's always a first. So when we talk about and learn about transition through Patty and all the work that she's done, can you think of some of the personal strengths for you and or your child that Patty encouraged through the work that she does every year? So what personal strengths and assets around jobs, careers, and life in the community does Patty encourage in you or in your child through this process of SALT talks?
Looks like there's one in the chat box too.
Okay, let's see. Spending time in the community. So, all right. All right. I'm going to put able and willing. We'll do that here. And then I'm going to do something else. What else? And because we talk about experiences, I'm going to say finding our favorite places. One thing I do around this is I encourage families to go somewhere that they really like the same time on the same day regularly and become a regular at that time. Able and willing to work with other people in new settings. Okay. Whoops. All right. Anything else? What other strengths did she talk about or encourage in you or in your child? I'm going to put down that she encouraged knowledge and learning about what was available. Anybody else?
We recently talked about advocacy, just kind of advocating for, well, like what I like and dislike, and standing up for what, is important to you, or what's, for, just standing up for yourself. There is another one in the chat too.
Okay, let's see. Starting a child at home with small chores such as making your bed and vacuuming. Yes. Responsibilities. Home chores and let's get chores. Absolutely, it's built from there. There's a great tool on the website I'll show you in a little bit that really kind of maps out in each kind of age or stage things that you can be doing to build those kind of skills early on. And it's never too late to start. So don't ever believe that this is a process that is punitive, that you didn't start. It's not meant to make you feel like what you haven't done enough. What else? Anything else in strengths and assets? I think another one that's difficult, but I think it happens in the room with your kid, with the family's kids, is the idea of just being willing to try. Would that be accurate, Patty?
Yeah.
Right. I think that kind of touched on that with new settings, but willing to try something new.
Yeah,
Or try after it was hard. Try something hard. Go ahead. I'm sorry,
out of their comfort zone, just something. So many times they're afraid of failing, afraid of doing something wrong, and it's like just being out of their comfort zone and trying new things. I think is a big step.
All right. So what have you guys learned or thought about or were exposed to through Patty as far as technology? That kind of is something you can utilize when looking for or thinking about a job or a career or just being valued in the community.
Depending on their level of conversation, you making use of the communication boards, or there are those opportunities.
Absolutely, and expanding those to have new vocabulary and new things in it as I have new experiences or preparing me for new experiences, right? What else?
Some of the parents will have to think back. We had Safe and Home speak on technology and remote, and how they offer support in the home, but then also out in the community. So we have new adaptive equipment in the chat.
Oops. Okay. I love, there's a story, when you say new adaptive, I'll wait for it in a minute when we get to community. There's another story, I think of it. And this doesn't have to always be high tech. And another story I can share here is when I do this work, I support a school district in Cincinnati who does a pilot with one of their transition classrooms and the teacher. And one of the families that we worked with, we had them go and kind of after they got a presentation like this, they went home and tried one thing, just try one thing, right? And the family came back and they were beginning home remodeling because we talked about independence and we talked about school goals and supporting school goals and school supporting family goals and working more as a team as part of the conversation. And she talked about the fact that, you know, they talked about what they wanted him to be able to do when he was in the school building and how they wanted him to be independent and more independent and see himself and grow his self-determination within the building because of his difference in mobility. But they hadn't done it at home because they were so used to them doing it for them that it was no big deal that she had to get the cups down or she had to access the cereal or whatever it was. And they really stopped and looked at how they were going to change the house internally so that he was more independent at home and didn't need to wait for somebody to get something for him. And they'd always wanted to do it, but this was a game changer to say, if we're going to ask the school to build independence in that setting and have him learn to be more self-determined and more of an advocate for himself in those settings, that we need to do it at home too. So though it wasn't technology, it was the technology and how the house was set up and the supports that they would have there to make sure that he could grow that way at home too. And that they could have a vision of it at home in a way that didn't create this vision of dependence for him into adulthood. Any other ways that Patty taught you about technology?
There's another one in the chat box.
I was watching the chat box and I didn't see it. Use technology to encourage learning information and exploring different things of interest. Okay. All right. Anything else? And the beauty of these is just like our lovely IEP, it's a living document. So you can start and go back and revisit each time. So when you think about community and things that are available in the community that can grow this level of connection and employment and volunteering and just having a valued life in adulthood, what do you think about that's available to everybody in the community that isn't in that disability realm, but is still something they could have access to?
I think a library is a good place to start.
Okay.
You know, getting the card and going there, you know, on a regular, finding books and stuff. Yep.
Yeah. Let's see, Park District classes. Perfect. Mm-hmm. What else? Yay. Yes. Whoops. Jane St. John, who is part of the UMKC team that started this work, talked about one of the things that made her realize that she wanted to kind of grow his skills, her son's skills in different ways, was because she imagined being his person and they would go do things in the community. They would visit flower gardens and they would, you know, do walks in the park and they would go to they would do those things. And when she realized when he first started to do his trajectory and express himself using the way he communicates his needs, wants, and desires, that was not on his list of things to do. And in fact, it was heavy metal concerts and WWE. And how is she going to manage that if that was in his trajectory or in his places and spaces that he wants to be all the time and not in hers? And that's really what kind of got this whole conversation going in a lot of different ways. What else is available? Volunteering for a community event of interest. Yes. And I think the key there is to find out interest, what my interests are. If there's a upcoming Comic-Con thing, or there's a car show, often they're looking for ticket takers or things like that. And not to say that I'm going to be satisfied being a ticket taker all my life, but I get to learn more, because maybe I love car shows when I see them on TV because I watch them without the volume, but maybe I don't like them when they're in person or things like that. So I can learn sporting events. Yeah. Anything else? So there's great places we can access just to build those things that I like, find people, the library has classes. I could find people that like the same types of books that I like, or things, and I can start connecting in that way. And I'm not saying this is easy. I never want to imply that this work is easy, that you naturally start showing up at a sporting event. But that was kind of why I had suggested this idea of finding favorite places. And if you're, I liken this to, we used to have the moms of kids with disabilities used to connect with each other when my kids were little, and we would meet for coffee every Tuesday. And every Tuesday we were there in some capacity. You came if you could, and we got to know each other. That was great. But there were other people that were there every Tuesday. There was the man who had chronic hiccups, and he was there with his wife every day. There was the woman whose daughter worked there, but she always came in and had a cup of coffee while her daughter was working to support her. There were just people that you saw regularly. And when I would miss a couple, or the man with the hiccups would miss a couple, we would start having a where were you? What was going on? I knew about their grandkids because we saw each other every Tuesday. And that sense of belonging is natural and real, no more or less than a true friendship. And it helps us get better at that reciprocal relationship. How are you? How was your trip? How was your vacation? And it's a great learning space for that kind of stuff too, especially if you can start it early. All right, so we're up at the relationship part of the STAR. So we're talking about, for reaching, and thinking about jobs, to think about careers, to think about how you're going to fill your day. What relationships would be important? This isn't going to be, it certainly can be mom, dad, of course, it could be names, but it also could be like roles of someone who likes something I like, or things like that. So it's going to be a little wordier. It's not going to just be mom or dad, though that is obviously going to be in there. So who would be in the relationships of folks that you might want to touch base with as a parent, as a professional, or as the individual when you're thinking about career and jobs and connecting community? What types of relationships are you looking for? Relationships with teachers, kids at school, school bus driver. Yeah. I'm going to summarize it and put relationships with key people in the school community. Is that okay? Because it'll take up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Being known is important. Being known is important. Well, who else? Or what else? Who else would be important?
What about transportation for work? Like getting a regular service and getting to know personally a particular driver, whether it's, Uber or Lyft or
okay. Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. So not necessarily, though I might use dollars, but it's the person, so that you can develop that outside relationship. So you can do that off call that we get to do if we know that they're going to be, I know of an Uber driver that used to like hover around a particular house at a certain time because they knew that's when the call was going to come in, so they could be close, or things like that. So, close. Oh my goodness, my typing. We'll do and connections. How's that? Does that summarize that well?
Yes.
And I think of that reciprocity. Let's see, local police and fire. So I'm going to put that in community. Or maybe not. Let's see. I love what you're saying. So yes, business owners. You know, one of the things that I did supporting a young lady with these tools is she wanted to work in daycare, and she had finished high school and she was still looking for a job. And we went into Google Maps and we put in her address, and then we scoped into what she was comfortable in terms of walking. It was a safe distance, all those things. And we just put in daycares. And there were 2 that she was trying to get employment. And she, whenever she saw a job posted to either one of those places, she applied. But there were at least 3 that she didn't even know were there. And she ended up, just by that act, finding a job, going in and talking to them and letting them know she wanted to work there, but there was no job posted. She just went and said, I'm Mallory, this is what I want to do. I want to work in daycare. I'm hoping that you could imagine and see me, and what would I need to do to help you be able to better have a vision for me working for you. And it really worked out beautifully, and she still works there. So that was kind of a cool story that just Google Maps. I'm going to put that over here now that I'm thinking of it. What else? And we can put in here parents, family, and friends to job shadow. And it's also to have new experiences. You know, maybe you know somebody, I'm going to use a really crazy example, but maybe you know somebody that does skydiving. And if I decide that skydiving is on my list of new experiences, calling them and saying, hey, I'm curious about this. Can I come watch you do it? Can I come, you know, that kind of a thing. I always encourage families to think about those places where they have people in their life that know nothing about disability except for what they've learned through you as a family, and how might they fit into your star, and asking them that directly. You know, you really are part of our circle, and I'm hoping you'll be part of our circle for a really long time. And maybe I hope you move out of my circle as mom and move into, for example, my niece Grace's circle, and that you're in both stars. But have you ever thought about that? And would you be willing to do that? And can we have a conversation about that? And it takes bravery for families to do that. But in that relationship space, it's really important, and it's had powerful results. That when you look at folks that when you walk up and you see them after a while, their first question isn't how are you? Their first question is how is, and then insert your child's name here. And what are they up to, and what are they doing? And recognize that, and as a strength in relationship and a potential for reciprocity. I just talked to a mom, and I was very disappointed that I do this for a living, because I was talking to her about IEP support. And I was at the same time talking about how management of my job as I'm moving out of COVID. And she goes, you know, I do kind of like job evaluation and revamping. And I do that consulting for a living. I could do this for you, and then you could help me with IEP. And I'm like, well, I can help you with the IEP because that's what I do for a living, but wouldn't it have been nice to have that reciprocity in there? But who else can you think of? And what other roles might be common in relationships of people who aren't getting paid to help you, but that might help you?
You always have like church groups or youth groups or community type groups like that.
When you're doing this for yourself, you'll be more specific. You'll have the church name, or you'll have the youth group director's name, or you'll have, hello, Celia. You'll have specific people listed in here. And so lastly, and Patty had kind of shared some of these with me, but what are some of the eligibility spaces that Patty introduced you to that now you know about, that you didn't know about before, that you can add into the eligibility supports? And I'm going to put Patty in here. I'll do SALT talks. There we go.
So one
What
of the
else?
meetings we had this year, we talked about services. So
Mhm.
yeah, so Andrea put in there OOD and the county board. Yep.
Yep, what else? Let's see. Yep. I'm going to put us in here. You didn't know about me till today, but we do support families.
There's one in the chat there too, Celia.
Let's see, SSD. Okay, yeah. You can also think about some of your paperwork. So if you have an IEP, if you have a transition plan.
On a larger like state, you have the DODD, which is of
Mhm.
course the
County board.
yeah, and then you have the Arc of Ohio and groups like that at the state level.
Yeah. Did you have Keith Banner or any of the community liaisons come in?
Keith had spoken earlier in the year, yes. And he was from the DODD, yeah.
Yeah. I love his role in particular because it really does lend itself to this moving into adult services or just into the community, even if you don't. Did I spell it right? Liaise.
We have Sandra mentioned the Access Center for Independent Living, their group up there in Dayton.
Yes. Oops. All right. Okay. So I love that you guys came up with some things that Patty didn't come up with. I'm going to open up hers. And she looked at it a little differently, but she looked specifically at, she put your son or daughter in the center. So your child. And then strengths that she listed: willing and enjoys working with others, summer work camps. So that's something we can kind of add together. Complete project life or project search programs, other similar programs. So if you have completed that, that would be a strength, or you're going to complete that. Personal organizing or life skills and chores. And then I'll introduce you to that blue book when we go there. As you know, families, parents, relatives, sibs, church or youth group leaders, volunteer or mentor leaders. And I encourage families to look for mentors for their kids and try to help them forge that type of relationship for any of your kids, not just your kids with disabilities, but neighbors, community or business friends, managers and owners, etc. So we've got those over under technology. She had cell phone and communication apps, assistant tech apps, Safe at Home, which she listed the website, the Win Wreath. You talk a little bit about that one. I'm not familiar, Patty.
That is they do like assistive technology supports as well, kind of like Safe and Home, but they do some other ones too. They have the medicine supports, and some specific medicine, some specific supports using assistive technology. So they're similar. It's just some slight differences.
Yeah, and then Patty's Live Binder. I would love for the professionals to throw into the chat. How many times have you run back to Patty's Live Binder to find that thing that you know you heard about, but that you want to share with another person or another family member? What a great resource that is for everybody. So, and then in the community, your family and friends and your neighbors, your post-secondary education programs, Ohio Means Jobs or the Ohio Department of Jobs and Family Services, which are available to everybody in the community. Then the websites for those summer camps, community volunteer jobs, and then your project life and project search, DODD, local county boards, the employment navigator, the SSA, the transition coordinator, the OOD, post-secondary. The other thing that we didn't list in ours is a lot of your county boards have behavioral support teams that maybe you didn't need access to because you had that level of support at school. But I think those services are another one that I see families utilize in adulthood, because they're kind of in the space of, it's a new experience and we see things we didn't see before, other things. But I think those teams are great. Trying to think what for families to know isn't that that's something they can access.
Celia, we'll have to, we're close on time here.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
I'm sorry, we're past time.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I get going. All right, so I'm going to come back to the main group. I'm going to stop sharing. I want to show you really quickly. What I'll do is I'll just put it in the chat. You can access any or all of these team tools at www. Let's see, www. Sorry, got LifeCourse tools.com. And you can see all of those there. And also the other website I want you to know about is frnohio.com, which is Family Resource Network of Ohio. We are having our Ohio Showcase. If you want to learn more and see how people are actually using this in different ways and hear family stories and professional stories, on Thursday, May 12th, is the Ohio Showcase, and you can register for that at frno.org or .com. For that, that's coming up. It's in person. So if you're ready to get out and run into people and see people and meet families that are using these tools and hear stories from individuals who have used these tools, please come register, check it out. There is a couple of trainings that we've got, several trainings online on FRNOs. You can go sit in a 1 hour about the trajectory or 1 hour about the star. We've utilized and held, or what do you call that? Put videos of different trainings. Why can't I think of the word? On that website. So, and then lastly, I want to go back. I want to include the, see if I can copy this and put it, I want to put the evaluation. And I know folks are really having a hard time really doing this. And I'm going to beg of you, because we are grant funded. This is how I'm able to do this every year at no cost to anyone and share these tools. But if you'll all click on that link right now and take a peek at the survey that we do, and please answer the questions. I would appreciate that. Maybe Patty, you can email it to them also to the group. As another last, and the last one is, I just want to show you, there's a ton of things specific to employment on the website. They've got a guide of how to use these tools specifically in looking for a job, and a trajectory that's actually done with stair steps as you plan it, and asks very specific questions about employment. So it's a great website with a plethora of tools, and I love doing this. So if you're like, I love what you talked about, but I'm overwhelmed, please email me and let me know, and I will happily walk you through this too.
Can you put your email one more time in the chat box? And I think if I understand, before I close the recording and before we sign off, but I think when you also will meet like with families, like if I am struggling with doing the star chart, like I want to really do this for this stage, I just reach out to you and you'll help me get started or understand what I need to do.
Yes, I will mentor you. And if you're not in Cincinnati, I can work with all of Southwest, but we have right now, and here's something really exciting for professionals in the room. If you can hang on for 2 more seconds with me. We have over I think we have almost 30 ambassadors in Ohio all over, but we have some really strong ambassadors in every area. But I want to share with you, this is growing through the Board of Education and in the area of transition. So Sarah Brooks Westerfield, who is at ODE in transition, has been awarded an opportunity to produce or to support folks in SSTs and schools and parent mentors to become ambassadors. And by the end of next year, we will have, what did we say, 64 ambassadors that are educators or parent mentors by the end of next fiscal year. So if you're interested in learning more, if you're interested in, Sarah's going to be pushing out information about that too, so that schools and parent mentor teams can exist in different areas too. So it's something that the state's really behind and growing in this and knowledge. It's going to be in the Ohio One or the Ohio One ISP, but only, you know, it's just going to be something that's encouraged to use for families to better participate in that. So, okay.
Great. Thank you,
Celia.
Celia.
Because I'll keep talking.
Oh, thank you for presenting. That was a great presentation on hoping, I'm hoping this will help our audience, participants, and anyone who listens to us later, to get started on the STAR chart and help with projecting for future goals. How do I get to these points? What do we need to know? I'm going to end the recording, and then I'll just be hanging on to Celia. If you can hang on just for a minute or two, just see if anybody has any other questions they want to ask outside of out of the meeting or recording. And also, I just want to we'll go ahead and put links also in our chat box for next month's sessions, as well as some of our SALT resources that you can link into to find things that the presenters have shared with us in some of our videos. So 1 second while I close the recording, and thank you all for attending. 1 second.